with 2 Saiosh CPD points. Very important notice, no other professional body has contacted Saiosh or requested for this webinar to be CPD verified. If you belong to another professional body like the Health Professional Council or the Engineering Council or the SACPC, etc., you will receive an attendance certificate within 24, sorry, not a certificate, let me rephrase that. You will receive an attendance email as proof that you attended this webinar, and you can check with your professional body whether they will allow you to claim CPD points. From a Saiosh point of view, Saiosh members, you're entitled to claim 2 CPD points after attending this webinar this morning. Please also note that this webinar will be recorded. In fact, it is recorded as we are speaking. And as with all our other Unpacking New Regulations webinars, this will be available on the Saiosh platforms, i.e. links to the presentation will be sent to each member of the presentation and the video recording, and it will also be available on our YouTube channel in case you missed it or in case you want to view it at a later stage again. Very important notice this morning as well. Although the Q&A box or Q&A item is open, we are not fielding questions and answers in that box today. We are urging you as members to submit your comments or proposed changes to the regulations, because remember the regulations we're discussing this morning is being published for comments, for public comments. So as with all other draft regulations, Saiosh will form a technical committee with experts in that specific field, including OHS legal advisors, to submit comprehensive comments on behalf of members. So this morning is quite unique because in the Q&A block, you are welcome to submit your comments. For example, this section or this construction regulation 2B or whatever the case may be should not read ABC, but it should read as follows, and submit your comments with your name on it. Saiosh assures you that every single comment that is submitted by members this morning will be considered during the technical committee review of these regulations, which I think we all know was published for comment with a 90-day period comment. If my maths don't fail me, that means the comments must be in, on, or before the 10th of June of 2025. So make use of this opportunity this morning when our presenter goes through the regulations, pointing out what has changed, what is new, etc. And if you got a view or a comment, place it there. We cannot at this stage answer the questions and say why did they change it, because it's the author is the Department of Employment and Labour, but we as a professional body will take your comments and work with that. Just as a matter of interest, you would have all noticed that the Department of Employment and Labour was quite active the last 2 weeks. They published 1, 2, 3 sets of new regulations and 1 draft, which is the one we're discussing this morning. The others were the noise exposure regulations, the physical agents regulations, which used to be the environmental regulations. Both those set of regulations were published a couple of years ago for comments, and we followed the same procedure as we're doing this morning. We send it out to our members, we have a webinar, we work through it, we collect comments, and the technical committee on behalf of Saiosh will be formed, and we will submit a total set of comments and hopefully positive comments to improve the regulations, which I think the Department of Employment and Labour is now trying to improve in any case. They also dropped the General Safety Regulation amendment, not amended regulations, just 1 or 2 amendments, minor in my point of view, but it's there. And then last week, the draft construction regulations of 2025 calling for comments, where we are this morning. Just as a matter of interest, I think you all know the first set of construction regulations were promulgated in 2003. 11 years later, 2014, the construction regulations 2014, which we are all working with at the moment. And they seem to like the 11 years, and 11 years later, now the draft construction regulations 2025. So just before I introduce our guest speaker this morning that took up his weekend after returning from abroad and agreed that he will go through the regulations with a fine-tooth comb and do a presentation on what he picks up has been changed, what has been included, what has been excluded, etc. The presentation this morning will be done by, and I would like to quickly read his bio out. And maybe at this stage, Nicholas, I can ask you to maybe put your camera on so that the viewers can see who you are. There you are. Good morning. So Nicholas Graham has kindly offered to go through these regulations. Please note, Nicholas is not the Department of Employment of Labour. Nicholas did not write these draft regulations. He's with us in this vehicle this morning that's going to unpack these regulations, and we're going to ask for your comments to see if we can add it to our comments, the Saiosh comments. So Nicholas Graham is the Managing Director of SRM, a leading consultancy specializing in safety, health and environment quality check solutions. With extensive experience in compliance, risk management and workplace safety, he has been instrumental in helping organizations enhancing their check performance throughout strategic consulting, training, auditing, and innovative software solutions. As a Saiosh chartered member, yes, please, thank you. As a Saiosh chartered member and a registered PR construction health and safety agent, Nicholas is recognized for his expertise in occupational health and safety, ensuring that businesses meet regulatory requirements whilst fostering a culture of continuous improvement. His commitment to excellence in the industry and industry leadership has made him a trusted advisor to companies seeking to optimize their check systems. With a passion for advancing workplace health and safety compliance, Nicholas continues to drive impactful change, equipping organizations with the knowledge and tools they need to succeed in evolving the regulatory landscape. Nicholas, thank you very much for agreeing to take up your weekend time and to dissect these regulations. I personally look forward to your comments, and I myself will be prompted to put comments in there if I believe there's something that should be changed or not. Over to you, Nicholas, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Absolute pleasure, Niels, and to the rest of the Saiosh team, good morning. Saiosh members, I have to say thank you very much for the privilege. It really is a highlight to be able to speak with all of you this morning, just to share some of my time and experience in terms of the construction regulations. Just a little bit of an overview before we get into the presentation. I've been in the risk and compliance field for over 30 years now. I've lectured for Northwest University. I've cut my teeth under Professor Johan Nell from Northwest University, who was one of my mentors for many years. I was a lecturer for them for many years, and I'm really looking forward to sharing my experience with everybody this morning. But just as a caveat to say, none of us as agents or individuals know every single exhaustive aspect. So just the caveat that I want to bring in this morning is this is the time and effort that I've applied to looking at the new draft construction regulations and applying what I've been able to see. And I trust that all of you will agree that as you start working with an act or a regulation, you start working with it over time, you will see something on one day, you will start working with it and auditing and implementing systems on construction projects. And then as you start working with it, you will see and realize other things. So just that this is a first glance response, having compared the 2014 regs with the new draft 2025 regs, this is a first glance. So I'm going to jump from here into sharing my screen and just put this in presentation mode. I'm just going to, Niels, can just one of you just confirm that that my screen is being shared? Yeah, it is.
My neck is being shared. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Let me just minimize this out of the way. Okay, so ladies and gents, again, thanks for your time. I'm going to do a brief presentation just as a helicopter view of what I have seen in terms of the draft construction regulations 2025. So we've already gone through a little bit of background on myself. So an executive summary or comparative analysis of the construction regulations 2014 versus the draft construction regulations 2025. So just as an introduction, the construction regulations, obviously, as Niels mentioned, came out in 2003. I think there's been a significant improvement in the regulations since 2003, having worked with them for a while, obviously now with the current regulations 2014. So under the Occupational Health and Safety Act 85, 1993, the construction regs and the Act have provided the legal framework for health and safety in South Africa and the construction industry for the past decade. However, with evolving industry demands, increased project complexity, and a growing emphasis on risk management accountability, worker welfare, the Draft Construction Regulations 2025 introduced significant amendments aimed at strengthening compliance, improving safety outcomes, and aligning with international best practice. So just to repeat that caveat, this is a first glance review. It's not exhaustive. We've had this for us to be able to read and comment on since last week. I spent some time last week reading it. I spent most of this weekend sitting down, doing a comparative for all of you between the 2014 regs and the 2025 draft. So just what I would love to be able to promote, this is a discussion, and I'm applying the time that I've gone through it to highlight some of the different changes to you. You may see something that I haven't seen, but basically we're going after the low-hanging fruit because we're required to comment within the 90 days, and this creates an opportunity for all of us as passionate professionals to be able to workshop this together as a group of people, to have a look at what I've emphasized. You may see something different, for us to be able to put those into the comment section so that Saiosh can review them with the technical committee and then advance them to the DOEL technical committee. What I have done is identified standout exceptions between the 2014 regulations and the 2025 draft. So just an overview of some of the changes that I've identified. So based on the overview, the bulk of the changes have been identified in the following. You will notice as we go through the review that a lot of the definitions have been updated, refined. So there's an increase in what I'd refer to as specificity. They have more clearly defined the definitions and added some new ones in there as well. So what all of us will know as professionals, having worked with acts and regulations for sometimes, that the definitions, are absolutely critical, because the definition, let's say it's for risk or defining an agent, as we're going through the regulation, wherever you see the term agent, it's obviously then referring back to the definition. So that is giving context to the various different regulations that we see. So the definitions have been updated. In terms of construction regulation 2, the scope of the regulations has been updated. Regulation 3, the construction work permit application, some of the nuances around the construction work permit have been updated. Construction regulation 4, the notification of construction has been updated, as has construction regulation 5, duties of the client. I really celebrate the fact that construction regulation 8 has been updated in terms of the management and supervision of construction work. There have been some updates to construction regulation 9 in terms of the risk assessment. Some in terms of demolition, there's been some condensing, simplification around there, and then construction regulation 26. So not everything has been updated. And again, based on first glance experience, having compared the 2014 to the new, those are the standout issues that I'm seeing. Based on my overview, the changes, the update brings greater specificity to the regulation. They've tried to condense it, shorten it, and make it clearer. So if you had to do a word count between the 2014 regulations and the 2025 draft, you'll find that the word count in the 2025 draft is less. They have simplified, condensed, and made clearer some of the requirements in there. The updates in many cases condense and simplify the regulation. So it must be assumed that the changes have been made due to issues picked up by the DOEL and other related construction bodies. So what I find within there is I find that the updates focus more on OSH administration and project-related incidents. If I have a look at where the changes have been made, there's not a lot of specificity or kind of increased targeting that have been brought to, let's say, specific site conditions around, let's say, fall protection or around scaffolding, because we know, I mean, that's actually been shortened, believe it or not. So if I have a look at where the changes have been made, have taken place, it looks as though it's there to focus and simplify the OSH administration around projects rather than on specific hazards and risks based on on-site construction activities. So just before we get in there, these are some of the things that I think are potential missed opportunities within the regulation before we jump in there. You'll notice when we get into the definitions that they have focused in on clarifying who the agent is. They've then defined the construction health and safety manager, and obviously the safety officer was always in there. But they have also referred to the construction manager, who was always in there from the previous regulations. But I think there's a missed opportunity. In terms of defining the construction manager, they haven't linked the definition of a construction manager through to any requirement for professional registration. It's just referring to a competent person who has been appointed. So I think that, for me, is a potential missed opportunity. I've always wondered around the construction health and safety manager. They seem to be a bit of a lost thing floating around in space rather than having more clearly defined roles and responsibilities. And I think that's a missed opportunity, because obviously within the structure of the categories created by the SACP CMP, we've obviously got our agent, construction manager, and safety officer. We see this person floating around as the construction health and safety manager. Now, what many of you may remember from, remember that a guideline is not the regulation. The guideline's the guideline, the regulation's the regulation. The guideline is not something that they're going to utilize in terms of kind of a legal parameter. It's there to guide, but it's not actually the regulation. But if you remember, in one of the guidelines, it said a client may appoint, this is in terms of a guideline for the construction regulations 2014. It did say that a client may appoint a construction health and safety agent, or, we were all quite surprised by this, a construction health and safety manager, based on the scope and risk profile of construction work, to represent him or her on matters of health and safety, provided that where the question arises as to whether construction health and safety agent or construction health and safety manager is necessary, the decision of the inspector is decisive. So we did have at some stage a lot of construction health and safety managers who are running around applying for permits, etc. I do think that there's a missed opportunity. There is a caveat built into the new regulations around a role and function for the construction health and safety manager. But I mean, a lot of safety officers are looking to progress to be a construction health and safety manager and then to an agent. I just feel, as an opportunity, whether you agree or disagree with me, this is an opportunity for us to provide a greater role and responsibility for OSH managers. And personally, I don't think that there are enough agents within the country to serve all of the available projects. So again, we'll jump into that particular challenge when we get into the actual regulation. So another thing that I think is a missed opportunity is considering the application of the regulation to smaller construction companies on smaller projects. Why I say that is, when we get into the management and supervision of construction work, one of the things that I think the regulation has done historically is it's made the bigger construction companies better and the smaller construction companies worse. You would have known from the construction regulation 2014 that the construction manager was required to be a full-time operational person appointed for a project. And there was a limitation with regards to them only being able to serve on one project. Now, the challenge with that is, for smaller construction companies that are in a kind of a smaller domestic market, is for them to have a dedicated construction manager holding that level of competency for a dedicated smaller project. It really, in many cases, what I've seen is it forces them to break the regulation. And what I've seen where companies are forced to break the regulation, particularly for commercial reasons, then they become happier with breaking the entirety of the regulation. So I think that's something that we could, as a body, propose how they intend to apply that having a full-time construction manager with that competency on a large project with a large commercial impact makes sense. But to smaller projects, having a full-time construction manager on a smaller project, to a lot of smaller companies, doesn't make commercial sense and forces them to kind of break the regulation. Anyway, that's been my experience. And again, something that I'm going to throw out there, which has caused a lot of consternation on a lot of the projects that we've been working on, is around the temporary works designers. Now, something that we've experienced a lot of over the past year is a lot of people submitting competencies to be a temporary works designer, and they've done a one-week crash course in temporary works design. Now, I think the regulator could go further to define the qualifications or clarify the qualifications for the temporary works designer. Anyway, that just provides an overview of the regulation before we jump in. So the way that I'm going to do this with everybody today is that I've got the 2014 regs on the left-hand side, the draft 2025 on the right-hand side, and I've made highlights which are then for our discussion. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump forward where we actually get into the new draft, and I'm going to jump into the previous definitions in the current construction regs. Now, something that may stand out for you in the 2014 regs, the agent was defined as, the agent means a competent person who acts as a representative for the client. So I mean, that could have been the principal agent, the architect, the engineer. So there was a lot. I think they've done a good job in terms of clarifying this, but the clarification, I think, introduces additional complexities that we need to consider. The new definition of an agent means a professional construction health and safety agent registered with a statutory body approved by the chief inspector, which is obviously in this case, the SACP CMP. So I want you to please hold that intention that now, because the agent category has been more clearly defined in terms of specificity, we're going to consider how that influences the rest of the regulation wherever they use the term agent. So again, there've been some changes to the client as well. The client means in the 2014 regs, any person for whom construction work is being performed. Now, again, I think they've improved on this, bringing greater clarity. The client means every person or entity, because a lot of times that I found on construction projects, what happens where a large organization or factory has their own maintenance teams who perform construction work on their behalf. So it's a client. It also may be an entity who enters into a contract to have construction work, construction project executed on their behalf during any stages related to construction work. So again, it's advanced on that particular definition, looking at an entity for who construction project is executed on their behalf during any stages related to construction work, because a contractor might have performed the excavations and wet work, somebody else is doing brickwork and plastering, etc. So they've brought a kind of a greater level of clarity to the client. And again, I think that's going to aid the regulation going forward. So here, ladies and gents, is a very, very interesting change in my mind. So where we had a look at the definition of the competent person historically, and we all know it's, and having spent time with Reynard Luch, etc., where he's explained this, the definition of the competent person generally meant suitable, able, skillful, suitably qualified. But then what they did is in the 2014 regulations, they then linked it into where a SACWA unit standard exists in terms of the National Qualifications Framework, then that shall be deemed to be the required level of qualification and training. Very interesting to note in the 2025 draft, SACWA and the reference to SACWA as being the benchmark for the required qualifications and training has been removed. I think this is going to open up some very, very interesting discussions because, again, what we have been experiencing on many projects is all the people who have done very, very good skills and qualifications overseas, they were having to then have their skills and qualifications recognized by SACWA before they could utilize them on the construction project. And again, there's a lot of very credible overseas courses which people have done. I mean, I know for some time that NEBOSH, the NEBOSH diploma, etc., in some of their courses wasn't accepted by some of the professionally registered statutory bodies. But I wonder if now that the SACWA reference has been removed, that they will now be accepting international, and they are really good international qualifications in terms of meeting the requirements of being a competent person. Obviously, the point of being familiar with the Act and the applicable regulations is still the same. I'd love to see any of your comments, not at the moment, but going into the comments section as to whether you think that is now beneficial or whether you think that is now going to become a hindrance going forward. Something to note here is a new definition. You would have noticed that previously they defined the construction manager and the construction health and safety officer. They have now defined in the new regulation the construction health and safety manager, means a construction health and safety manager registered with a statutory body approved by the chief inspector, again referring to the SACP CMP. So here I've just highlighted this because I think this is a missed opportunity. I think it's interesting that the agent, the construction health and safety manager, and the construction health and safety officer have to be competent and registered with a professional body. But the construction manager, now, if you read 8.1 in terms of what the requirements are of the construction manager, this is a person who's responsible for the administration, the physical site conditions, and occupational health and safety on the project. But they've just said the construction manager means a competent person responsible for the management of physical construction processes and coordination of administration and management processes on construction site, but no requirement for professional registration in terms of SSCP, CMP, etc., which I personally think is a missed opportunity. Again, if anybody agrees, it might be an opportunity for you to be able to put that in the comment section so we can take it forward to the technical committee. Why should the agent, manager, and officer have to be professionally registered, but the construction manager is just a competent person? Anyway, it's worth the discussion. So the construction health and safety officer remains relatively the same. And again, what I've done to try and help everybody is to manage by exception is where it doesn't seem. But guys, just because I haven't highlighted something doesn't mean that there isn't a small nuance in there. I've basically come prepared for this meeting, having spent several hours reading through the regulations, both of them several times, and then comparing the two. It doesn't mean that this is an absolutely 100% bulletproof, exhaustive review of every single. It's a first glance looking what has changed and whether there's been a kind of a word count change between the different definitions and parts of the regulation. So the client, as we know, updated, the competent person, construction supervisor. Construction work seem to remain the same. I've been through it because I know it has significant applicability. I've been through it several times, and it seems to be, even from a word count perspective, very, very similar. You can see from the contractor in the 2014 regulations versus now, there's been a significant amplification in terms of the definition of a contractor. So previously, it meant an employer who performs construction work. Now, a contractor means an employer who performs construction work and includes an organization or self-employed person that contracts with a client, principal contractor, or contractor to carry out construction work. So again, it's brought greater clarity and specificity to the regulation by more clearly defining that definition of a contractor. Maybe some of you may agree or disagree, but it's going to be interesting to see what people consider. Again, having done a kind of a review of the designer, this is one of the, because there have been so many construction incidents recently over the past many years that have resulted in significant fatalities, I thought that they might have done some greater work around the requirements for the designers and our EXA registered engineers and architects, etc. But again, obviously that would also work with the incorporated standards that have been referenced throughout the regulation as well. So I couldn't find any significant changes to designer. I do note that ergonomics has now been included in the 2025 definitions. So ergonomics meaning the scientific discipline concerned with the fundamental understanding of interaction among humans and other elements of a system, and the profession that applies theory, principles, data, and methods to design in order to optimize human well-being and overall system performance, which wasn't as clearly amplified in the 2014 version. So again, just jumping forward, that seemed to be the limit in terms of some of the definitions. Professional registered engineer has been expanded on a little bit to include the professional technologist. It's more being combined. So the technologist was below, but it seems as though they've combined that all into one. And you might see that as a bit of a trend when you look through the regulation, as they seem to have done quite a bit of combining of regulations within the construction regs. One of the things that I think is of great interest, which is a new inclusion in the definition, is this reference to pre-construction information, which is going to become relevant when we look at Regulation 5. So pre-construction information means information in the client's possession or which is reasonably obtainable by or on behalf of the client, which is relevant to the construction work and is of an appropriate level of detail and proportionate to the risks involved, including information about the project, planning and management of the project, health and safety hazards, excuse me, including design and construction hazards and how they will be addressed, and information in any existing health and safety file. Now, this pre-construction information is referenced in the client requirements in Regulation 5, but then also becomes apparent in the construction work permit application, because it said certain prerequisites have to be fulfilled by the client, 5.1 being that. And this, I think, again, is referenced in clause 5.1 in terms of pre-construction information that's required to be handed over as part of the process. So this is going to become applicable in terms of the client's requirements, then obviously being applied to the construction agent, and then again become applicable as part of the construction work permit application. So again, structure seems to have been remained the same in terms of the definition. Again, you might find a small nuance in there based on the time that I had available to look at the regulation. I couldn't see any significant difference between the definition of a structure in 2014 and the new draft. Okay, so that kind of brings an end to some of the requirements that we saw around the definitions between the two regulations. Let's start having a look at the scope of application. These regulations are applicable to all persons involved in construction work, and here's the new addition, for the duration of the project life cycle. Okay, so that's a new addition. Obviously, the DOEL is then wanting to emphasize for the duration of the project life cycle. So that is going to be from the commencement of the project through the different stages of development, through the project completion handover. And then the interesting part is then going to be how they've then referenced Regulation 11.2, which is then applicable to owners of structures for this future lifetime of the structure. We all know about that ongoing requirement for the inspection of completed structures by competent persons in terms of the structural integrity of that particular structure. So again, there's a new reference brought in there that references into Regulation 11.2. The scope 3, regulation 2.3 seems to be the same as it was in the 2014 regulations. Now here it starts to get interesting again as we moved into the application for the construction work permit. Now, based on this and or exemptions based on the one that I'm showing you, so the new construction work permit or exceeds 300, where the construction permit exceeds 365 days. Now, please focus on this. Or it's 365 days, or the works contract is of a value exceeding the CIDB grading of 7, which is 60 million. Or, now here is a new inclusion, which is very interesting, where it's either 365 days or a CIDB value of 7, or the exceeds 2 stories above the ground, which is a new inclusion. So whilst many projects may not proceed over 365 days, and whilst many projects may not be over 60 million, the exceeding 2 stories above ground, I think, is going to open up a whole new layer of requirements for construction work permit applications. Now, you will have noticed when we get into the notification of construction, the notification of construction remains the same, that it's not applicable, or that regulations 5 and I think it's 8 are then not applicable for a single-story dwelling for the client's own use. This is obviously going to be interesting because we're now looking at 2 stories above ground. And again, I think that's interesting for many of you to comment. And again, I think we need to hold that intention is, how many agents do we have nationwide to be able to manage all of the construction work permits that are required? And would it be possible for the construction health and safety managers to then start forming a function? I know that some agents are using safety officers to go and audit projects. I have an opinion on that, whether you agree or disagree with it. But it's going to be interesting to see the new level of work in terms of the amount of construction work permits applicable to buildings that are 2 stories and above ground. Okay, now here, a fully documented, as part of that construction work permit application, it was in there before, fully completed documents contemplated in 5.1a. All I'm pointing out here is the fully completed documents in terms of the submission of the construction work permit 51A. 51A is now different. It now refers to those pre-construction documents. So although this hasn't changed, it's the same. The reference point is now different. So the submission still has to be done in writing. The client complies with Regulation 55. That's still the same. With regards to the registration of good standing of the principal contractor, all that remains the same. And then all the references to the client's responsibilities under Regulation 5 remains the same. The client must ensure that the principal contractor keeps that. All of that is exactly the same within the regulation. There don't seem to have been any significant changes there. When we move through to the notification of construction, you can see there have been some changes there. So as we're looking at it thus far, you can see there have been some significant changes in the definitions. There have been some changes in the scope and application. There have been some changes around and again, a lot of them seem to be administrative changes that are done. Obviously, the more significant site-specific one is around two-story buildings, and then moving into the notification of construction. And again, I think that these updates are helpful. Says, now this would remain the same, as that the contractor who intends to carry out construction work in terms of construction regulation 3.1 must at least 7 days before notify the provincial director on the Annexure 2. Again, the same as what was there before. But now they've included the notification of construction, and it says here a client. And again, I think this is good clarity. The reason being that a lot of construction work is not just facilitated by a contractor. Regularly, where I'm engaging with our national clients who are big factories, big organizations, their own internal maintenance teams may facilitate what falls into the definition of construction work. And there, if it's not done by a contractor, there was a lot of debate around this, is what do we do where it's not done by a contractor, it's referring to the client. So here on the notification of construction, the client intending to carry out construction work other than work outlined in Regulation 3.1 and is registered on the Register of Projects in terms of the CIDB, so Construction Industry Development Board, CIDB Act, must notify the provincial director in writing at least 7 days before commencing work. And the notification should be submitted on the same Annexure 2. So where the changes come in there, the notification of construction is not just limited to the contractor. Where the client is intending to carry out work, the notification of construction then becomes applicable. So then now diving into the duties of the client. So you'll notice that I made reference to that pre-construction information that was required earlier, where there was a definition. Now, where we look at C5.1, there's now 5.1a, and it looks profoundly different. Previously, it referenced a baseline risk assessment, etc. That was referenced in the previous regulations. Now, there have been some changes around there. So now, 5.1a says a client must ensure that all pre-construction information is provided to the client's agent. Now, because that's now been ring-fenced, that client's agent is now very, very specific in terms of a PRCHSA and the contractor, and on behalf of, on request to an inspector. Prepare a documented design risk assessment for an intended construction work project. Now, previously it might have referred to, now I know that designs were accommodated previously, but it obviously referred to a baseline risk assessment in terms of A. Now that's now been updated in terms of prepare a documented design risk assessment for intended construction work. Now, the design stage in the written report was included in the previous one, but I just wanted to highlight that that's still in there. Again, a lot of the requirements around the client's responsibilities have remained the same through a lot of the sections, again, based on that same caveat I introduced earlier of it being at first glance. I will jump through to I. There have been some changes here around 5.1i. Says the client needs to take reasonable steps to ensure cooperation between all contractors appointed by the client to enable each of the contractors to comply with these regulations. Now, this is a new inclusion, provided that where there are multiple principal contractors or contractors on site, appointed by the client shall coordinate cooperation between the contractors to ensure health and safety control. Again, I think that's a new inclusion that I think would benefit that coordination, because often on projects there are multiple principal contractors, and ensuring that coordination, particularly in terms of overlap of responsibilities, who takes responsibilities for particular areas, and how you coordinate and ensure cooperation between those contractors, because that can be a significant contract risk. Now, what I want to draw out here, there weren't significant changes. Now, there have been no changes around ensure periodic health and safety audits. And again, of the principal contractor, both safety audits and documentation audits, that remains the same. But I want to point out the following. Again, the change isn't made here, but because of the clarification of the definition of an agent, I think it is going to introduce some very, very interesting questions. Where a construction work permit is required, as contemplated in Regulation 3.1, the client must, without derogating from his or her health and safety responsibilities or liabilities, appoint a competent person in writing as an agent. The agent is then referring to the PRCHSA to act as his or her representative, and where such as appointment is made, the duties as imposed by these regulations upon the client apply as far as is reasonably practicable to the agent appointed. Now, because that's brought further clarity, again, I think it's going to call into question, because they've now clarified who the agent is. Remember that the client is responsible for auditing the health and safety of the principal contractor, auditing health and safety on the site. Now, if they've then clarified that who the agent is and that the agent must perform the duties of the client, is it now clarifying the fact that only PRCHSAs are the guys who can go and audit projects? Because this is one of the biggest issues I think we've experienced in industry. One, clients appointing people who are not qualified, not competent. And again, that falls onto that, because the regulation's always been clear that they must appoint a competent person. But I know on a lot of projects where they've appointed safety officers to be their agent. Now, again, this may be a contentious issue, but as a professional body, this gives us the opportunity to thrash it out, put your comments into the comment section for Niels and the rest of the team to take it through. But I wonder if this is, again, highlighting the fact that agents who delegate their responsibility to health and safety officers or others to go and do their audits on projects, is this now going to call it into question, where that particular thing is applied by some organizations? Now, because they've clarified the definition of the agent, I think that may call some things into question. And again, because it's greater levels of specificity, I do believe that the intention behind the regulation was always for the competent person being the agent to go and do the audits. But again, it might call into question the amount of agents that we have to be able to execute on all the projects that we have around. So again, there are nuances to what I am proposing. So the rest of the duties of the client, again, seem to remain relatively the same based on that first glance imperative. A potential missed opportunity. I've done a kind of a word count between here. There doesn't seem to be any significant changes on the duties of the designer that I've seen thus far. Again, you may be able to pick something out based on the time and availability that I had to be able to look through the regulation and do the comparison at short notice. I would have hoped that because of the vast amounts of fatalities that we've had in the construction industry, that they would have focused a little bit more holistically on this. What improvements could have been made, again, remain in question. We might have some EXA-registered engineers on board. Again, this is going to be, it's great to be part of a multidisciplinary team that looks at these regulations and looks at potential updates. I was hoping we could have done some updates around there, but it doesn't seem. Now, one of the things that I am going to throw out here is I would have been hoping, and this is going to be one of the things that I'm going to put in for comments, is around the design of temporary works. Now, the competency and references in the definitions is very clear with regards to the designer. But what we have noticed on a lot of construction projects recently is people submitting competencies. They've been appointed in a health and safety file as the temporary works designer, And then when you go and have a look at their competency, they're not an EXA registered engineer, but they've done some form of short course in temporary works design. Now, that's always made me incredibly uncomfortable, because especially if you're talking about a significant load-bearing structure that is holding hundreds of tons of concrete and rebar, etc., in the air, somebody who's just done a crash course in temporary works design, for me, doesn't meet those qualifications. And we've then had to start writing in a very, very clear reference to what we require as the competencies for a temporary works designer in your health and safety specification. I know I've chatted this out with Rob Atkinson and a couple of the other agents, just to kind of calibrate with other professionals that I chat with from time to time. And I think both myself and Rob are on exactly the same page. Duties of the principal contractor. And again, this I've just highlighted in terms of the compensation for occupational injuries and diseases. No change. They've just changed the reference to the new act. So duties of the contractor. I think let's just wait. Where are we? All right, there we go. Duties of the principal contractor. I couldn't see any kind of massive changes around here other than references. It's still the same types of controls that are required to be in place from the contractor. Who knows? Maybe some of you who've got a lot of time to go through this with an absolute fine tooth comb. And I'm sure, as I said earlier, many of you who've been in the industry, you start working with a regulation, you read something in a way one day, 2 months later, you look at it and something else, because you've worked with it for a while, stands out. So I trust that as we all start collectively, as 25,000 amazing Saiosh registered people start having a look at this video and reading through it, that we're all going to apply our mind to specific improvements that could be done. I didn't see any significant changes around there. However, where we do see significant changes is around Regulation 8, around the management and supervision of construction. And personally...
Nicholas?
Yes, sir, go for it.
Sorry, I just want to sorry for the rude interruption.
No, please jump in, Niels.
I just want to, we've got just short of 1,000 persons on this webinar, and we, as time ticks on, I see that we might lose opportunity, rather we losing opportunity, but our members that are online losing opportunities. I just want to reinstate again, as I mentioned at the start of this webinar, like you said, this is a first glance overview of it. There's no purpose of chatting in the chat box, and yes, there is a purpose, but we want your proposed comments as we're going through this regulation. Please put your proposed comments and changes. So rather than asking a question, why can XYZ not do this, or why should this do it? Please, we need your comments. Put the construction regulation number there. What is your proposed changes? And we will make sure that it's submitted with all the comments that we will take into consideration when the technical committee is formed. If I can appeal to the members to make use of this opportunity to change now from making statements and asking questions, because we're actually asking the questions to no one. You're not the author of these regulations. So guys, please, there's the opportunity. Place your comments of how you see certain regulations. And there's some good ones. I might just add, thank you very much for those that has quoted the regulation and proposed that this should read XYZ. Nick, sorry for the interruption. Please go ahead.
Welcome at any time. It just gave me an opportunity to have a look through all the different comments and what is being said by guys out there. Well, that's interesting. Anyway, I don't want to waste a lot of time on that. It's having the desired effect. So it's promoting conversation in and amongst all of the amazing members. And together, strategically, we will be able to kind of distill a lot of those comments and go back to the technical committee with some substantive requirements around how to make this better before it's ultimately promulgated. So great work there. Really enjoying seeing some of those comments. And it's nice. We don't all have to agree on this. We all have different opinions. But again, collectively, we will kind of provide a better outcome. So where the changes came in around management and supervision of construction work, I do personally celebrate this, because one of the things that I found on the construction projects, particularly for some of the poorer, not poorer financially, but I'd say that they had smaller construction companies had to jump through a hoop in terms of managers and supervisors and assistant supervisors and this appointment and that appointment. And I think the changes that they've made to Regulation 8, they have condensed and simplified. You'll see that 8 is kind of only goes up to 8.5, where previously 8 went all the way up to 8.10. So they have, in my mind, condensed and simplified a lot of these requirements. And I'll go back to one of my original statements. One of the things is that they've removed construction regulation 8.4. Now, it said 8.4 referred to no construction manager appointed under sub-regulation 1 may manage any construction work on or in any construction site other than the site in respect to which he or she has been appointed. Now, I can see that they've taken that out. Fair enough. But I still think it creates, I don't know if they've, just because they've rolled it up into 8.1, that it in my mind creates a little bit of conflict, because 8.1 still says a principal contractor must, in writing, appoint one full-time competent person as a construction manager with the duty of managing all construction work on a single site. So although they've removed 8.4, it doesn't really kind of take the imperative away, including the duty of ensuring occupational health and safety compliance, and in the absence of a construction manager, an alternative must be appointed by the principal contractor. Now, what I ring-fence there is that that's incredibly challenging. They've taken 8.4 out, which was very, very clear in terms of you can only manage one site. I don't know how that, again, just first glance, kind of trying to create some discussion around this. How does that help smaller construction companies? Now, these, like a smaller construction company who's got one or two construction managers and are running 8 or 9 projects, because commercially it's not viable. Now, the only reason that I raise this is I've seen a lot of smaller construction companies have been unable to appoint a competent construction manager for each and every site. And you've got 1 or 2 guys that are oscillating between the projects. And what I find with the regulation is where people are being forced to break the regulations, they then become quite more open-minded to breaking other aspects of the regulation. So again, I'm just throwing this out there to create some comment. I mean, it does say over here, in the absence of a construction manager, an alternative must be appointed by the principal contractor. Okay, is that creating a little bit of a backdoor for that? Because, I mean, if I jump in here to the next one, 8.1b, a principal contractor may, in writing, appoint one or more assistant construction. Now, previously, the assistant to the construction manager was a must. It was an imperative. You had to appoint them. So you had to have a construction manager and you had to have an assistant. Now, I'm very happy that they've, how can I say, diluted that. A principal contractor may, in writing, appoint one or more assistant construction. And again, considering the risk profile, project complexity, etc., you're going to then have to substantiate that at the end of the day. Now, this is new. The poor construction health and safety manager who's registered with the SACP, CMP now eventually gets something to do. A principal contractor may, upon having considered the size of the project, in writing, appoint one or more construction health and safety managers, again, referencing the definition or different sections thereof to ensure occupational health and safety compliance. So other than that exemption, or not the exemption, other than the guideline that came out with the 2014, where the client could appoint a construction health and safety agent or construction health and safety manager to discharge their duties, which is in the guideline, which again created quite a bit of conflict and consternation, when they promulgate this and they bring out a guideline, whether that guideline is still going to allow the client to appoint an agent or a manager, again, remains to be seen, but we'll see what comes out. A construction manager must, in writing, appoint a construction supervisor. So that's an imperative. That always was a must in terms of the construction supervisor. A contractor must, upon having considered the size of the project in writing, appoint one or more competent employees for different sections thereof to assist in the construction supervision. And again, clearly defined by the, let me just jump back in there. Every such employee has, to the extent clearly defined by the contractor, a letter of appointment, and the same duties as the construction supervisor, providing that the designation of such employee does not alleviate the construction supervisor. Okay, again, so some of these were the same as after consultation. A contractor may, after consultation with the client, having considered the size of the project and the degree of danger likely to be encountered or the accumulation of hazards or risks at the site, appoint a full-time or part-time construction health and safety officer. Now, that is 5.4. So full-time and part-time seems to be relatively the same in terms of the construction. So that's now 5.4 instead of 5.5. That's why I highlighted it. So again, for when this does get promulgated, many of you are going to have to go out there and change your appointment letters. It's not under 8.5. It's now under 8.4. So what will become quite clear now is that this ends on Regulation 8.5 in terms of the management and supervision of construction work. And you'll see that quite a few of these things from 8.6 to 8.10 have been removed. And 8.6 spoke about the contractor may appoint construction health and safety officer to assist in the control with health and safety aspects on the site, unless he and she is reasonably satisfied that the health and safety officer that he and she appoints is registered in terms of the statutory body. So obviously that's kind of been rolled up into 8.4. Construction manager must appoint in writing construction supervisors responsible for construction activities. And again, a lot of that has been condensed and rolled up. The contractor must, upon having considered the size of the project in writing, appoint one or more competent employees for the different sections of to assist the construction supervisors. Now, again, that's been taken out 9 and 10. Have really kind of been seen as being rolled up into these appointments. So you've got an 8.1 construction manager, which is mandatory. You've got an assistant to the construction manager, which is a may, it's not a must. You've then got the ability to appoint, but again, it's a may. I was very much hoping they were going to do a must. It's a may appoint one or more construction health and safety managers, depending on the size and nature of the scope. And then you must appoint construction supervisors along with the construction manager. That's a must. And then also appoint in writing one or more employees who are competent. So that echoes some of the sentiments in the other appointments. Let's just go and have a look at Regulation 8.5, where the contractor has not appointed an employee as contemplated in Regulation 8.2 and 8.4. Or in the opinion of the inspector, a sufficient number of construction health and safety managers or construction health and safety officers have not been appointed, then that inspector must instruct the employer to appoint a number of construction health and safety managers or construction health and safety officers as indicated by the inspector. So 8.6 to 8.10 has been removed and it's been condensed into these appointments. It's going to be very interesting to see in the comments whether you think that that is an improvement. I think from an administrative perspective, for the big construction companies on mega projects, it would have made sense to have construction managers and assistants and supervisors and assistant supervisors, etc. For a big mega project, yes, that would have helped you with the discharging of duties to multiple aspects of the project. I do think that was challenging for some of the smaller companies. As you can see, this is now being condensed. Construction manager may appoint an assistant, but the construction supervisors are in there. And if the inspector doesn't consider that enough construction supervisors have been appointed, then construction managers and additional health and safety officers can then be appointed. It's going to be, not that I can see the comments at the moment, but it's going to be very interested to see kind of what has happened there. Okay, into the risk assessment, and you can see there's been some kind of adaptations around there. Now, having read through this, the bulk of the update to Regulation 9 around the risk assessment seems to be administrative around the review of the construction risk assessments. 991 says a contractor must, before the commencement of any construction work and during such construction work, have risk assessments performed by a competent person appointed in writing, which risk assessments form part of the health and safety plan to be applied on site and must include. Now, these kind of things, the review plan, the monitoring, and all of that was always kind of part of the regulation. One of the things to note in 9.2 is previously they referred to ergonomics. Ergonomics does seem to have been left out of this. So a contractor must ensure that all employees under his or her control are informed, instructed, and trained by a competent person regarding the hazards and risks that and related work procedures. and control measures before any commencement of work and thereafter at times determined in the risk assessment, monitoring and review. Okay, principal contractor must ensure that all contractors are informed. It's pretty similar. Contractor must consult with the relevant health and safety committee. That's the same. Now, this is new in terms of the risk assessment format. It says a contractor must ensure that physical or electronic copies, that's a new inclusion there in terms of electronic copies of the risk assessments. Because, you know, a lot of organizations are using software now for their risk assessments. We are going into the more technologically adaptive age with AI, etc. So a contractor must ensure that physical or electronic copies of the risk assessments of the relevant site are available on site for inspection by the inspector, the client's agent, and any contractor. Sorry, I just need a drink of water. Or representative, trade union, health and safety committee, etc. Now, you'll notice here that there are some amendments. There always was a requirement for the contractor to review the relevant risk assessments where there are changes to design or an incident occurs. Again, still the same imperative to review the risk assessment where changes occur or where an incident occurs, but now it jumps back and it says, or as contemplated in 9.1 D or E, which is then referring to the monitoring plan and the review plan. So, and not exceeding 12 months. So one of the new requirements that they're building in for risk assessments is that the trigger for the review of the risk assessment is either done based on changes, incidents, the monitoring and review plan, your own requirements that you built in there, but as a minimum, not exceeding 12 months. So your risk assessments are going to be required to be reviewed and approved by the relevant people, integrating with the Act, the safety reps, etc., not exceeding 12 months. Now, I guess here was one area under Regulation 10 for fall protection. Again, I was hoping for a bit more specificity, maybe some greater clarity, a little bit more rigor to be built into the regulation, because I'm sure that many of you will agree that out of any of the fatalities that we've experienced in construction projects over the past many years has particularly been around fall protection. But again, the regulation at first glance between Regulation 10 seems to be pretty much the same as what it is in the 2014 regulations. And again, some of you, when you've got a little bit more time, may point something out. And again, we can drop all of these comments through to Saiosh to be able to run with. Structures, again, remains pretty much the same in terms of the word count and the number of documents that it's got in there. Again, there's just a little bit, again, this just goes back to the scope of the regulations where it refers to Regulation 11.2. The owner of the structure must ensure that inspections of the structure are carried out periodically. Now, here, it's going to be the inspections are carried out periodically by a competent person in order to render the structure safe for continued use, that the inspections contemplated in paragraph A are carried out at least once every 6 months for the first 2 years and then yearly thereafter. Now, again, that echoes the same sentiments that were in there. But again, this just relates back to the scope. Temporary works in terms of Regulation 12 from a word count perspective and having read through looks pretty much the same. But again, I was hoping for a little bit more rigor or specificity around here, again, based on all the structural collapses that we've seen throughout over the past couple of years. So again, excavations remains pretty much the same between the two regulations. No significant changes noted there. There are some coming up now when we get into demolition work, and it's just predominantly focusing around waste. Let me just jump through here. So demolition, where we get down to G and H, you'll notice that G and H in the old regulations, so cause, convenient and safe means of access to be provided to every part of the demolition site in which persons are required to work. It looks like G and H, speaking about erect a catch platform or a net above the entrance, G and H seem to have been combined into one in the new regulations. So again, not greater levels of rigor or specificity, it's been combined. So here's where some more significant changes have come in. A contractor must ensure that no equipment is used on floors or working surfaces unless such floors or surfaces are of sufficient strength to support the imposed loads. Where a risk assessment indicates the presence of asbestos, the contractor must ensure that all asbestos-related work, this is now linking into the asbestos abatement regulations, because in the past they would have just referred to the asbestos regulations. Obviously, it's linking into new regs. And where a risk assessment indicates the presence of lead, again, we're now linking into the lead regulations. That's pretty much remained the same. But again, it's just linking into the risks. Tunneling seems to have remained the same. Scaffolding has, believe it or not, got shorter. It's, previously, 16.1 required that a contractor appoint a competent person in writing who must ensure that all scaffolding work operations are carried out under his or her, so it's the scaffolding supervisor, and that all scaffolding erectors, team leaders, and inspectors are competent to carry out work. Now, 16.1 seems to have been removed. 16.2, a contractor using access scaffolding, seems to have been moved up to 16.1. So a contractor using scaffolding must ensure that such scaffolding, when in use, complies with the standards incorporated, so SANS 085. So it's interesting that they've taken that out. So we're then going to be left with, and again, it should be sufficient, the scaffolding erector, team leaders, and inspectors. Again, it's going to be interesting to see some of the comments in there as whether people see that as an improvement or not. I think considering the aspect is to have a scaffolding supervisor as well as scaffold erectors and team leaders and inspectors, it remains to be seen whether people consider that to be of an improvement in value. Suspended platforms seem to be around about the same. Just moving on, there didn't seem to be any significant changes around suspended platforms, nothing around material hoists, bulk mixing plants, all remained pretty much the same. Cranes, there isn't a change around Regulation 22. Let me just jump ahead to Regulation 22, bulk mixing plants. Cranes now just refers to the new driven machinery regulations 2015, whereas the 2014 regs referred to the driven machinery regulations 1988. But again, not really any significant or substantive changes between the two. Construction vehicles and mobile plant seems to be relatively the same when compared to the previous regulations. Electrical installations has remained the same, as well as the use and temporary storage of flammable liquids seems to have remained the same between the two regulations. This is interesting when we get into water environment. Previously, in the regulation, a contractor must ensure that where construction work is done over or close proximity to water, provisions are made for preventing a person from falling into water and rescuing a person in danger of drowning. A contractor must ensure that where a person is exposed to the risk of drowning by falling into water, the person is provided with and wears a life jacket. Now, yeah, that in itself proved an additional risk. So now it's been combined into one. A contractor must ensure that where construction work is done over or in close proximity to water, that he or she is in possession of a site-specific fall protection plan. So they're now alluding back to where your fall protection plan that's site-specific, if you are working near water, then your fall protection plan should cover those particular requirements and have been developed by a competent person. Applicable to the specific work and the environment prior to the commencement of work, including records, maintenance, and inspection of all equipment. So it doesn't say anything about the life jacket. Now, I think the complexity that introduced, especially you do get life jackets that are more compact and are water activated when you fall into, but again, those are very, very costly. And where people were working over water, having them with those kind of big orange life jackets on proved to be kind of an additional risk on top of the risk of falling into water. So housekeeping, just again, jumps out into a little bit more specificity around waste management and around removing waste and debris from the site. So E, as you can see, has been elaborated on. F and G have been, F and G are still in place. But this is the new requirement, ensuring that waste and debris are not disposed of from high places with a chute unless the chute complies with the requirements as set out in the regulation. It's adequately constructed and rigidly fastened, is inclined at an angle of no more than 45 degrees. If of the open type is inclined at an angle of less than 45 degrees to the horizontal, where necessary is fitted with a gate at the bottom to control the flow of materials and discharges into a container. F and G seem to have remained the same. H, the catch platform is literally the same as G. You can see the reference to the catch platform, ensuring construction site built up areas. So some of this has been taken out and rolled up into an expanded E in terms of housekeeping. Stacking and storage remained pretty much the same. Fire precautions on construction sites, pretty much the same. Construction employees and facilities, pretty much the same. And then also through to offences and penalties. So we're about 12:15. That kind of brings me into land in terms of an overview of the regulations. Again, a lot of it does seem to be administrative. At this stage, I'm going to stop sharing and just go in. I'm actually going to be quite interested to go out and have a look at some of the questions and answers. Niels, I don't know if you want to jump in here. I know that we've still got some time, but it's going to be interesting for me to just have a look at some of the questions that have been raised by people.
Nicholas, firstly, I just want to say well done to take a complete draft set of regulations, go through it in a couple of days' time, and then deliver this comprehensive presentation to see what has changed, and also giving your opinion in between. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. The Q&A was open. There's a bit of a mixed bag of suggestions, or rather making statements rather than comments. I'm not sure if I'm sure you got access to that. Are you able to see, open it? And I'm gonna leave it in your hands to glance at the question. And if you believe, yes, that's a good one, say so. And obviously, you know, we can consider it and put it into the comments of the Saiosh Technical Committee. If it's just a statement, then you're also welcome to not carry on with it. So I think you just need to stop share your screen at this stage, and then maybe we will.
We'll just have. Okay, can you see it there?
Okay. I can see you now on full screen. Thanks. Yeah. So
where can you see the comments?
Questions. 51 questions. I'm sure some of them will be
Neil,
fine.
Sorry.
Neil,
sorry. Nick, at the bottom of your screen, there's a button that says Q&A. You can click on it.
Oh, there we go.
Expand. Yeah, there'll be 3 tabs. Open, which is quite a lot. Answered, which is, don't worry too much about that. So just have a look at the open section. If you feel the need to reply to a great question or comment or proposed change, you can click on answer live. Then I know when I go back onto the records that you've actually answered that live, and it will still be recorded for comments and proposed changes. Thanks, Nick.
Okay, so I'm just jumping back into the comments section. And I mean, this is why I love our professional body, is that you've got lots of different aspects and opinions. No one of us is going to be able to see all of the nuanced details within here. And it's good that we had diverging opinions and some different issues in there. I'm just quickly reading through. 100% in agreement. Nicholas can bear witness to what you're saying about smaller companies. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how I've always been a little bit uncomfortable with that, where the regulation, a lot of I would say the bigger construction companies had some form of influence in the development of the regulations, one would assume. But what it has done is it's made a lot of the smaller companies not really care about compliance because they really feel as though they can't meet the standard. So I think even if we could suggest that to the regulator as to how they intend to make it more applicable to smaller companies. And I'm not suggesting that we should dilute the regulations and make people unsafe, not at all. But we don't want to make it so that people can't meet the requirements. All right, just going through here. I thought the SACWA question, the removal of the reference to SACWA for competent persons is positive. There seems to be a lot of people there was one I came across just now with regards to a SACWA reference. And somebody said, I think the removal of SACWA verified qualifications open a channel for provision of a substandard proof of training. Yes, I do agree with you on that, where people are basically designing their own certificates. But in playing devil's advocate on this, and having been involved in the industry, and part of our company is we've got a training company as well. The seaters, and I'm sure we can all inform and can kind of confirm this, the seaters have not performed well. And especially with the kind of erosion of the seaters now moving over to the QCTO, it's left so many people up in the air with regards to training providers, and particularly for us who develop a lot of short courses, people doing kind of short courses and their SACWA certificates. I get the philosophy behind the unit standards and then doing qualifications. The philosophy is correct. But I think one of the questions around that, let me just see what this person said. They could have instead added additional regulatory bodies to oversee training, authenticity, and standards of compliance on trainings, which may be aligned with British standards and to SACWA, where I do background employees' qualification checks. Yeah, 100%. I think it's going to be interesting what people feel about the removal of SACWA. I think, and I allude to Lawrence, I do definitely what you say there has got merit. I think it's a double-edged sword, because I think the SACWA qualifications have in one way created an exclusion around certain like international qualifications, which were good and which were valid, but it has also protected us from a lot of the kind of underground training organizations. For many of you who've been out there, I don't know how long we had to fight that battle around the competency of a fall protection plan developer, because there it was a competent person who is responsible for developing the fall protection plan. And how many times we had to take people to task in their health and safety files by saying, yes, I know you might have been doing this for 10 years and you might have gone to some training provider, but when I have a look, are they an accredited training provider? Is it aligned with the SACWA unit standards for the development of a fall protection plan? And we did pick up a lot. So it might be a bit of a double-edged sword. I can see that there were some comments here with regards to the construction manager should be registered and affiliated with a professional body. I think a lot of us agree on that. And I think Niels felt the same in my discussions with him the other day. Removal of SACWA evaluation benefits and disadvantages. So I think we're all on the same place there. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. It's created a challenge, but it does create some form of protection. Martinez Buerta, draft construction regulation 3.1 exceeding 2 stories and above. Suggestion structures come in different shapes and forms, and my feeling is that 2 stories should be amended to refer to meters high. Yeah, that's interesting. Construction managers not have professional registration could result in making decisions. Yeah, I mean, for many of us on construction projects for some time, when the regulations just came out in 2000, even the 2003 regulations, where you would have construction managers submitting copies of CVs. Many of the construction managers at that stage had never done a qualification. And again, the regulation have helped take people on a journey towards achieving some form of formal qualification. But a lot of the time you're getting CVs in terms of experience, but a lot of construction managers, again, at the lower end of the market, not having done formal qualifications. There's a question here. Saiosh is a voluntary regulatory body recognized. This is by Niels. The SACP is a statutory regulatory body. Just clarifying that. Should you believe that registration should be with a voluntary body? Jeepers, can everybody stick their hands up for that one, guys? Can we all motivate that you should be able to achieve registration as a professional with voluntary or statutory bodies? Because I think we can all agree that sometimes there is a bit of there is a bottleneck or a constraint sometimes with some of the professionally registered bodies. So anyway, Niels, you've got my thumbs up for that.
Nick, if I may just add a
Please
comment
jump
on
in.
that. It is Saiosh's view that where we're dealing with at professional level, and I'm talking about engineers, architects, and in other professions, medical practitioners, legal practitioners, etc. We as Saiosh have no doubt in our mind that the registration to prove competency must be with the statutory body.
Yeah.
So if we just take at the moment how the draft looks like, they have specified now all three of the OHS registrations, and with all three they have specified a statutory requirement with statutory registration. We are of the opinion that if you look at the scope of work designed by the SACP-CMP for a safety officer, even a candidate safety officer, candidate managed health and safety manager, we're not of the opinion that force statutory requirement should be at this level. No doubt that when we look at the agent and you look at where the agent is involved in the design stages, the concept stages, sitting around the table with the engineers and the designers. So we as Saiosh will most certainly take it up with the department and say there are, in a way, a bit of depriving of work, if you wish, if you force statutory requirements, which is normally in any world or any country designed for professionals which holds NQF level 8, 9, and 10 qualifications in engineering and medicine or whatever the case would be. So we're not Saiosh is not against statutory requirement, but also the department currently with the draft got a bit of double standards, and you pointed out. So they're quite happy to refer to the CPMC Act and make statutory requirement for the 3 safety positions, but the other designation, which is construction manager or principal contractor, which one would think there you should step in, they're quite happy to say, no, we're not going to force statutory requirement. In fact, we're not even going to require any professional registration. We're just going to say, be competent. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, excellent. So, guys, here is a very contentious issue, and I think it just gives us an opportunity to discuss it. Lawrence, again, thanks for making your comment. You've said here, the client appointing an agent to do audits at intervals not exceeding 30 days. What about SHE officers who did auditor's course but not registered with the council as agent? What should happen in this case? Now, I think especially with the kind of increased clarity around the definition, for me, my personal opinion is that the intention behind the regulation is and always was that the client's agent, the PRCHSA, is the person who should be doing audits on behalf of the client. The safety officer and the safety manager are the people who are doing the on-site audits between contractors. So if you are the safety officer for the principal contractor, you should be the one performing audits on the subcontractors for the principal contractor. And the only reason that I'm highlighting this, guys, and it's not that the safety officers are not competent. The reason that the SACP-CMP has come up with the 3 categories is because there is a significant difference in terms of education, training, and experience between an agent and a safety officer. And I'm not trying to make a big thing of this. It's just if you have the qualifications and education and experience to be an agent, then be an agent. And then you are able to go and do the audits. But I have to say my opinion, and what I think the intention behind the regulation always was, is that the agent is the person who's performing the audits of the principal contract on behalf of the client. I think anybody would be hard-pressed to try and convince us otherwise, that the regulation would allow a safety officer to go and execute an audit on behalf of an agent. I don't see it in the regulation, and especially now with the new highlighted, clarified definition around who an agent is, and that agent is responsible for doing for performing the responsibilities of the client, and that includes auditing. I think it's now deadly clear that the agent is the person who should be doing the audits and nobody else. But again, that's why I included that part of the guideline, where the current guideline linked to the current regulation says that the client may appoint a PLC-HSA or a construction health and safety manager. Now, I personally wouldn't necessarily be opposed to construction health and safety manager, because I saw OSH managers were having permits issued against their name by the DOEL within specific areas for smaller, lower risk projects. So maybe in terms of being able to take the pressure off some of the agents in terms of the number of projects, I wouldn't be opposed to registered managers performing those kind of tasks on lower risk projects. I mean, how else are managers supposed to get experience? I mean, I mentor quite a few candidate agents and some managers in terms of increasing them to agent level, but they've got to get the practical experience to go out and do it. So my recommendation would be that we consider motivating that the agents obviously carry higher risk jobs, and that the managers do have that opportunity, as is in the current guideline, to be able to go and do smaller, lower risk projects on behalf of agents. But I don't see, and guys, I know this is contentious, and I know many of you do audits on behalf of agents, but personally, I think it would be interesting to see if there ever was a fatality on a site and a safety officer had been doing the audit on behalf of the agent, how the DOEL would see that in terms of client performance, in terms of them fulfilling their duties as far as is reasonable and practicable if a safety officer was doing an agent's job. Anyway, that's just my 5 cents worth. If there's a 61 or 16.2, this is June Enoch. Is there a 61 or 16.2? Does it still give the construction manager to appoint a supervisor? That's going to depend who represents the client, because let's say you're working on behalf of, let's say, Tiger Brands, and Tiger Brands is the client. You're building a new factory for them. The 16.1 is going to be the person who represents the client on all health and safety matters. It's going to have a look at a development company. That's an interesting question, but I would look at the 16.1 or 16.2 appointing the construction manager on behalf of the client, if that structure exists. However, if it's for an individual who is doing a whole load of developments on their own, I mean, they are the chief executive officer. They are responsible for health and safety. So that's quite an interesting question. Okay, 5.1D. How would a designer take consideration of health and safety specs during design? Yeah, I mean, I've always had a bit of a chuckle on this. I don't know how many projects does anybody work on where the architect or the engineer takes significant cognizance of what the health and safety agent says. So yeah, it is what it is, and it's been designed in a manner that the agent should be one of the first people that's appointed, so that they should develop a risk assessment based on the concept. That initial concept risk assessment should be handed over to any of the designers to consider. How often that takes place in reality remains to be seen, but it is part of the process. One of the things that I do think is applicable is that the PRCHSA, as was originally intended, should be part of the professional team appointed right from the beginning. And again, why I'm happy that they have ring-fenced the definition of an agent and clarified their involvement, particularly in terms of that pre-construction information, is I think we've lost count on how many times we were contacted and the construction companies already broke ground and the client's then looking for an agent, and the agent's never been involved in the process from the beginning. So this now ensures that the agent is part of that professional team, having a kind of an equal standing at the table with any of the engineers and architects or other designers. But again, working that out in reality, I think, is going to be interesting. Norco, so much as it's important to have only CHSA audit the sites, it's not going to be practical. Most PRCHSAs are CEO and companies directors, and running around the site would not make financial sense. Well, yeah, where I hear you around it making it financial sense, but I'd rather have CHSMs, construction health and safety managers, do audits under the supervision of a PRCHSA. Well, I did allude to that. If a PRCHSA is doing the audits, is enforced compliance in this regard will only be limited to paper. Almost all PRCHSAs have their own companies. Well, I would agree with you on that. If this is the case, what are you going if you have to close 10 projects running at the same time? I absolutely agree with you, and that's why I think that we should, as a body, consider promoting an agent and a manager as people who can consider this. I think from a reasonable, practical rigor, qualifications, and experience perspective, I've always been uncomfortable with the safety officer going around and performing performing that task. Manager, agent, possibly, but I don't know if we can argue financial viability all of the time in terms of the agents. One of the things that's happening is agents are operating such cutthroat businesses, and the only reason that they're able to quote at the price that they do is because they're not doing the audits. The safety officers are doing the audits. That's why they're able to kind of get so many projects, is because they're not doing the work. So I think there needs to be quite a bit of, and again, contentious issue, be that as it may.
Nick, sorry to interrupt you.
I'll go for it.
Just want to check, you are reading some questions from the Q&A.
I am reading questions from
okay.
the Q&A.
I think there's just...
Yeah.
No, there's so many, Nick. I think I'm struggling to follow.
All right,
with you,
I'm at 12:02. I'm down at the last comment that was added at 12:02 by Noko Freddy Moloto.
Okay. Well, at this rate, we'll be here till midnight, Nick. I don't know if you're ready for that.
No. Well, what I'm just doing is
no, please carry on.
Gareth, I'm just cherry picking from.
No, Nick, you are doing absolutely fantastic. Please, I just wanted to make sure, because there's obviously a lot of questions in the Q&A. We can't possibly get through all of them, but please, I'm enjoying this, and I'm sure everyone else is. Thank you.
Yeah, we're just cherry picking.
Yes, sir.
That, and guys, I'm sure if we had to run this through a legal process with some of the legal technical specialists, I think that everybody would be hard pressed to promote a case where a safety officer does an audit on behalf of an agent. I think legally, reasonably, and practicably, I think anybody's hard pressed to promote that case. And I think once we get back to agents doing the work, people are then going to be quoting at the right and reasonable price.
Nick, sorry for the interruption.
Yes,
here. For those that are still online, nearly 800 of you, please remember that the Q&A is still open to submit your comments with a reference to the regulation that you believe should be changing while Nick is working through the questions. Please make use of the opportunity to submit your comments. We will, as Saiosh, take it into account when we do the technical committee work. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah. So Zakele Shamane, I hope I've done justice to your name. Please forgive me if I haven't. I feel the word may should be removed and must be used, especially on all appointments. I think sometimes I couldn't agree with you more, but what it does is it creates a level of flexibility based on project size. So if that's what we're trying to promote, that there is flexibility within a framework, I think having some of them in as a may rather than a must creates that flexibility. Because just remember, if you're on a big mega project and you've got construction managers and you've got assistants, or you don't have assistants, if there's a suite of fatalities, you've then got to go in and you've got to demonstrate that you've acted reasonably. And reasonably may have been appointing, because let's say you've got 10,000 people on a construction project, you're building another Madupi or Kasili, it would be considered reasonable for you to have appointed assistant construction managers. But what happens if you're on a smaller project? If you put must in there the whole time, it's gonna kill the smaller construction companies. So my suggestion for everybody to consider is that flexibility within a framework creates structure for smaller and bigger projects to be accommodated. Cool. Thanks for the positive feedback, guys. I really appreciating the feedback. It's great. Change the definition, right? Change the definition of competency and remove SACWA NQF from the draft regs will hopefully resolve the incomprehensible delay in the development of QCTO qualifications. I'm in agreement with you, Ken. Oh, Ken Annandale. I've had various discussions with you at the Saiosh conferences. So Ken Annandale, I do agree with you. Part qualification, skills programs, and required learning material. This bizarre scenario continues to create a massive logjam. Couldn't agree more. Ken, interest safety. That's where you're from. Good morning. In regards to Regulation 10, fall protection. Regulation 10C, thanks if somebody else has picked up something that I haven't seen. Regulation 10C only talks about training of employees working from a full risk position, and the record thereof excludes training of full personnel. Kindly revisit the regulation because it leaves a gap for employers to just nominate anybody to be a full rescue personnel without training. Please highlight the training for full rescue personnel. Thanks very much. I think if you've been able to see something that I didn't, that I kind of skipped over, that may be valid. I'm going to, once we've finished the presentation, I'm going to go back and make a note of that. Right. I'm getting a lot more thumbs up now and a lot less questions as we're getting into what I cannot understand is that the medical professional registered with HPCSA pays less for their annual fees than the CHSO. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I'm not going to make comment on that. Broad discussion. Neglect between the construction health and safety ×3 hang behind professional engineers who is OT registered PLCH. I don't really understand the question. Let's wait on the outcome of the George collapse investigation where the CHSM was employed and not the CHSA. Yep. Yeah. Actually, thanks, Jacobus Louis Kutsia. A very, very valid point where I believe that there wasn't a construction health and safety agent on that George collapse where there was a CHSM. So, yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how the appointment of a CHSM may or may not have contributed to the George building collapse. Very interesting. Okay, I think I'm getting down to the bottom. I've run out of, there's a question here. Bunny van Rensburg, pre-construction information. Okay. The above definition refers to construction phases. Consider the phases and split the construction regulations into 2 parts. Now, remember, the SACP CMP has already defined those phases of construction. So you might have to integrate it with that. Part 1, Bunny is just saying, pre-construction matters. This involves preparing health and safety specifications, lay down areas, etc. Part 2, physical construction. Yeah, so there are the 6 stages of a construction project which have already been spoken about by the SACP CMP. Many of us have gone through sitting the panel reviews would have had to prepare around those 6 stages.
Nick, sorry to interrupt
yeah.
again.
Go for it.
We've got a comment from one of the members that I know there's a lot going on. I just want to make sure that at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button.
Yep,
When you
that's
click on that, it pops up a separate window for you. Am I right?
Okay, for Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
I'm in the chat section.
It's okay. We've had a lot of naughty posts there. They were not supposed to post the official Q&As in the chat, but it's okay that you've read it. If you have energy left and feel list to do it,
Yeah,
you
as
can
if anybody's still
grab it
got
during the
appetite
Q&A.
for this, let me just grab we've got 20 minutes.
We've got as much time as you've got, Nick. But yeah, just open that Q&A there. You can go to the top. You can scroll to the middle, cherry pick a few. It's up to you. There's a lot of good ones in there. Thank you.
Okay, got it. Thanks, thanks, Gareth. Okay, principal contractor. This is from Christian Kutsia. Principal contractor must open and keep on-site physical and electronic health and safety file, which must include all documentation. Should this not also carry over to the principal contractor? Yeah, no, that's I have to agree with you on that. Annexure 3 still has the same problem as before. There is no space for the expiry date. Secondly, an occupational health nursing practitioner usually do not have a practice number. Yep. Okay, that's another valid one. Regulated so far, I do not see information pertaining to the validity period of medical certificate. Thanks, Johannet Ace. I would like to have seen the rigging activities better defined. Yeah, I agree. There are some. It seems that if you guys will agree with me, a lot of the administrative requirements have been updated, but there's not a lot of changes in specificity around construction work activities in the applicable regulation. Why would you want to stipulate the construction manager needs to be professionally registered? There are a number of construction managers in the industry with many years of experience, but they do not necessarily have formal qualifications. Kempen van Wyk, I think my experience would be, and I've been doing this for 30 years. When I first started off in the industry, NOSA was the go-to company. There were no professional qualifications. We've now been forced to go and get BComs, BTechs, international diplomas. So whilst we as safety professionals were unable to proceed without a formal qualification, I think my concern that I've seen within construction managers is those guys that are QBE, qualified by experience. I think we all need to be on the road of continual professional development, not negating the experience that many of the construction managers have, but having a formal qualification and professional registration enforces the fact that you have to go down a CPD road. You've got to be continually focusing on your continual professional development. So I am in favor of that, and I think quite a few of the other people are. Under the agent, professional should be replaced with registered, as I feel it will force clients to only appoint a PRCHSO, and in turn, any person registered as a CHSA will not be employed and will be unable to proceed. Professional construction health and safety officer. No, but I mean, there's, yeah, Alistair Castle, I don't necessarily mean we can agree to just, oh yeah, PACHSA. Okay. So I think we've sorted that one out. Construction manager must be registered with the statutory body. This registration has also been in existence before the health and safety was added. It therefore only makes sense that this is included in the 25 regulations. Okay. Keith Cook, I agree 100% around the conversation pertaining to competency. I have been trying for many years to apply at the SACP, and all my international certificates, I agree with you, have been denied. So this is, I think that when I first saw it removed, I thought that's going to create an interesting paradigm, because I know that the SACP, CMP, I know that they have accepted some historically, and there is already a decided case in terms of accepting an international certificate. Yeah, but those have been denied. And I don't think, I mean, having gone through some of those international qualifications myself, they are really rigorous courses. And again, you can complement that by doing local courses on local legislation to make it more kind of South Africa specific. So I can't comment on Saiosh being registered as a voluntary or moving them over to a statutory organisation. With the 8.1, the manager for the site is the most dangerous to the site, and they mostly do not allow us to conduct our work as safety officers. This is Kanyisa Willie. They the ones who should be registered and must have all the training conducted so they can see. I have to, in part, agree with you based on my experience of a lot of construction managers promoting and supporting a positive OSH culture. It doesn't apply to everybody, but just based on what I've seen. So the exclusion, this is Tapelo Mayamela. The construction regulations regulates the industry and RSA, so the exclusion of NQF is disturbing. So how is the standard going to be managed to ensure that all are competent and familiar with the construction regulations? I'm a graduate member and busy with my NEBOSH. So yeah, no, I do agree with you. I'm a chartered member, but my chartered qualifications are based on international qualifications. So as long as your international qualification is registered and recognized by their local accreditation bodies, I wouldn't necessarily see a problem with that. Good day. Construction Regulation 4C, I believe, needs to be carefully assessed before adding it to the regs. We already have delays with the current permit applications. Can DOL demonstrate capacity to the process? Yeah, that is also true. How does the client do a design risk assessment while they are not specialists in design? Design agents are appointed for this. For a baseline risk assessment, I agree. Yeah, I think that is going to require a little bit of clarification around that new requirement, because baseline risk assessment has been taken out, and it's a new design risk assessment. And I think they could qualify what that design risk assessment means, and who would they envisage as being the participants in that design risk assessment. Here's an interesting question I've seen come up a couple of times. Why has the 2-story above ground been added? It's because of structural support requirements. Should square meters or number of occupants not be considered? Fair enough, but I think that they were looking for something to ring fence it rather than square meters. Yep, something that can be considered. Removal of SAC evaluation has benefits and disadvantages. I think we all agree on that. Construction managers does not have professional registration could result in making decisions which introduce risk into the project. He or she is not accountable to a professional body. At least extra registration should be considered. Yeah, I don't know about, I think construction managers should have to register under the SACP CNP, although there's some constraints around that.
Nick, just on that one,
Yeah.
it's the CPMC Act of 2000 and it's Section 18 that compel, if you want to practice as a construction manager, you have to be registered. So that's where, that's what they, in that section where it later was added for the three safety categories. And I'm still dumbfounded that the department has basically double standards and opt for the safety guys to be registered with the CPMC Act 2000, but not construction manager. Crazy. But anyway, we spoke about it.
Yeah. Cool. Next question, section 11.2. An owner of a structure must ensure that, and obviously there's those requirements, there should be a definition for a building owner in the definition section. The owner of a structure. You see, the thing is, why they've ring-fenced, if you have a look at the definition of a structure, it's more than just a building. A structure is also a cell phone tower and a whole load of other requirements. So it's not limited to just a building. The owner of the structure must ensure that it has the correct structural integrity by having a competent person assess it periodically. So I don't know whether that would have necessarily helped.
Nick, if I can just quickly comment to that one as well, just something that comes to mind. That CR11 with the construction owner, we've had some debate with the department before, and that is purely an administrative thing where the owner must now at certain periods have something inspected and have a document for it. This again is a golden opportunity to do what the department told us a while back, that should be removed from the construction regulations and placed under the administrative regulations. You've got a whole set of construction regulations dealing with constructors, contractors and construction, and suddenly when the building is finished now, there's no more construction work. The owner, that's an admin, it's an admin department and should have. So we'll put it in the comments. Remove to the,
or the national building regulations.
Or the national building regulations. Thanks, Nick.
Okay, 5.1b paragraph seems to be missing information and should refer to paragraph A. Okay, thanks. Structural engineering survey should be added into the definitions. I agree with that. Some more comments around the two-story. Training experiences verified by SACWA professional body. That I agree with that. Stefanus Janssen van Vuren. Competent person, this is what they were suggesting. Competent person means, or who has in respect of the work or task to be performed, the required knowledge, training, and experience, where applicable qualifications specific to the work or task, or required knowledge, training, and experience, as verified by SACWA professional body Saiosh. Great idea, and is familiar with the Act. Fantastic idea, where our professional body, which should be the go-to organization for people to have their qualifications verified, if some of the other bodies that are supposed to be validating training material aren't working. Couldn't agree more. Okay, Edward Brewer. How will the construction regulation work if the client is from out of country? Is it correct that you should still stay the principal contract and be binded by contract? That's going to be interesting if it's still going to be. But I mean, the applicability of the regulation is to South African work. But you're saying if the client is external of the country, how are you going to manage the contract? Well, I'm going to leave that up to Reynard to apply his specialist legal mind into that. Okay, there's a comment in there, RBI. I'm just looking for how we're doing for time. Niels and Gareth, I know that it's 12:51 now. I'm busy training De Beers in another site at the moment, so I've got to start wrapping things up and get back into my other presentation. But
100%, Nick. I'll leave it up to you to maybe just glance at one or two others and and then we can wrap it up. No problem.
Cool. Okay, so let's have a look. Concerned of the other country and other country training for South Africa. Yeah, there is a concern, but again, if you have a look at a lot of international courses, there's dodgy local courses as much as there are dodgy international courses. So I think the litmus test should be that the international or local courses are validated by some competent body. So local courses should be validated by Saiosh. The international, like NEBOSH, is validated by the Scottish Qualifications Authority. So, I mean, they have their own kind of SAQA equivalent over there, which NEBOSH is validated against. Regulation 16 should be registered, and 8.1, not quite sure what you're talking about. Ignore medical certificate of fitness. It does ignore certificate of fitness. Okay, is it ever going to come to a point whereby agencies and any hiring organization to say requirements SAPP and Saiosh, because I find Saiosh to be informative and helping. All right, that's a political hot potato I'm not going to handle. Leighton Bennett, sir, definitely one of the pioneers of our industry. Big respect to you. One of the risk assessment practitioners who I deeply respect. Leighton Bennett, I require a construction supervisor to be appointed with a 10(1)C as a fall protection supervisor to ensure the work team is monitored while working at height. The fall protection planner is not working at height, supervising height. Leighton Bennett, PLC HSA. Yeah, valid comment. So, ladies and gents, I think that brings me into the end of this demonstration. I think from my side, thank you very much to all of you. It really is a great privilege to come online and engage with other passionate professionals and really share. My heart is for ensuring that people go home to their families at the end of the day, and we collectively all contribute to that as a body. So from my side, thanks very much for your time. Niels and Gareth, again, privilege. Thanks very much for the invite.
Thank you, Nicholas. Once again, great session. Thanks for your time. Thanks for going through the regulations. Thanks for sharing your opportunities. The great thing about this is we got it on recording now. It's going to be on the Saiosh YouTube channel. Your presentation with your highlights is going to be emailed to all Saiosh members. Talking of which, members in good standing. So if you were lucky today to actually access this webinar and your membership fees are due, a bit of marketing, please update your membership to qualify for all these great benefits. Just two things in conclusion. Just remember that this webinar is CPD verified by Saiosh with 2 CPD points. Saiosh members can claim these 2 CPD points from their profile. All members, all attendees will however get an email within 24 hours, which if you are not a member of Saiosh, you are more than welcome to submit that with the content of the presentation today and ask your professional body if they will allow you to claim CPD points. But from a Saiosh point of view, it's Saiosh CPD verified. And then, as I mentioned, the session has been recorded. Members will get a direct email with the presentations and the recordings, and it will eventually be also on our YouTube channel for the public to view. Just finally, I did speak to the department last week. It sounds like they're going to have a live session like this where they will read out the regulations. It sounds like it's going to be on the 15th or the 19th of April, somewhere in Mpumalanga. What Saiosh will do is we'll make sure we're there with our recording devices, and we will record it. So it's important then to double back with this presentation to see what the department themselves got to say and their viewpoints on the changes. From our side, from Saiosh, thank you for joining. Nick, thank you for your great presentation. Gareth, thank you on the back end for making sure all the technical issues work. We got your comments. We will certainly, when we form the technical committee from Saiosh's point of view, look at all those comments that came through. Please be safe, and until next time, cheerio.